Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the video. Thought I'd do something a little bit different today. I'm going to just navigate around this car here, which is I thought I would talk to you while I'm cycling. So I've got all my camera equipment set up. Usually my backdrop would be in front of my workshop table, but it's a little bit of a static environment, a little bit boring, unless I happen to be talking about something that's very much related to the workshop. So I thought, you know what, let's try something different. Let's try going cycling together, and you can watch my little ride and I can regale you in conversation regarding topics that I've picked to discuss. And today's topic is a little bit controversial. Well, I should say so, it's very controversial actually, and it shouldn't be, because it's all just facts and figures. It's all just numbers at the end of the day. And numbers shouldn't be controversial. They're either going up or they're going down. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, this is actually my second ride today. I actually had a ride this morning out with a friend of mine who's returning back to Singapore. Shout out to my Singaporean viewers. I will have to come and visit my friend, and we'll go for a ride. And are you stopping for me? Oh, okay, thank you. He didn't need to, but he did, or she, I didn't check. Yeah, I'll definitely come to Singapore and have a little ride with you guys. And I'll try and maybe meet some Singaporean YouTubers. Well, I'm hoping you will enjoy this more, getting to see me ride, rather than, like I say, just standing in my workshop. But do let me know what you think, if this is better or worse. I'm obviously open to suggestions. Let's get off this main road somewhere a bit quieter for a second. Here we go. Right, CO2 and global warming, or global climate change, whatever you want to call it. Now this subject is interesting because a lot of people are very worried about this. And there are some of you out there, I'm sure, who believe that the world is literally ending because of CO2. One carbon, two oxygen atoms within a molecule, okay, CO2. Now, I'm not worried about CO2. I am worried about pollution, and I've discussed this in a previous video. Just to clarify for those people who may conflate or misunderstand what I'm about to say, I do not consider CO2 to be a pollutant in the traditional sense. I don't consider it to be a pollutant at all. And what I mean by that is this: I am deeply and very concerned about pollution in our environment. The sort of things like heavy metals in our water supply, or plastics in our oceans, or various different chemicals in our soils, and air pollution, for example, smog, particulates, things like that. These things can really kill and harm and cause mutations in human beings like us, right? These pollutants are dangerous, whereas CO2 is just a gas. You're breathing it right now and it causes you no harm. So basically, I don't consider CO2 a pollutant, but I am worried about pollution. I just want to make that absolutely clear. And people did react quite badly to it when I suggested that CO2 was a bit of a scam, or at least it wasn't as serious as people were making out, particularly politicians. And if you can't trust a politician, who can you trust, right? But yeah, a lot of people really got their knickers in a twist about it because they felt that I was lying, or that I was dismissing something that was important to them. So today I want to look at the facts. And if you are open-minded and able to think critically, and particularly if you're able to go and do your own research, then I think you might be surprised about what's actually going on. And whether CO2 is as big a problem as you think it is. So here we go. Hopefully everyone can remain calm and level-headed with regards to this subject. And at the end of the day, if you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. I'm more than happy for you to hear, more than happy for you to give me your opinion, as long as it's, well thought out and reasonable and doesn't just involve a tirade of insults. Although if that's what you want to do, knock yourself out, I don't care. So, where do we begin? Firstly, let's start with what CO2 is, how much of it we have, and what it's useful for. Because I think that would be a good way to start. It's a gas we have in our atmosphere. Now, here's a fun question for you all. How much CO2 do you think there is in our atmosphere by percentage? Okay? So this is the gas that's going to end the world. This is the gas that's going to destroy us all. How much CO2 do you think there is in the atmosphere? Is it 20%? Is it 15%? Is it 5%? Is it 1%? Any guesses? Stick it in the comments below if you want to guess how much CO2 there is in the atmosphere. Don't look it up. You'll be surprised. If you didn't know, CO2 makes up 0.04% of atmospheric gases. 0.04%. Actually, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, it's even less than that. The one that I heard quoted recently from a politician who is, against this whole CO2 conspiracy thing, was 0.04%. But in reality, it's actually 0.035%. So it's less. way less than 0.5%. Anyway, that is a tiny amount of gas in the atmosphere that is CO2. Now, this is not illogical. This is a fact, by the way. You can look this up if you wish. And it's not illogical when you consider the mixture of gases in our atmosphere. I used to scuba dive many years ago, and we had to learn about basic gases, basic science of gases and pressures and atmospheres as part of our diving course. And we were told that it was about an 80-20 split. 20% oxygen, 80% nitrogen. But in reality, it's about 78.8%, I believe, nitrogen, about 19 point something percent oxygen, and the rest is other gases. And within that tiny percentage, obviously, you have CO2. I believe the biggest gas after oxygen is actually, is it xenon or argon? One of the two. But basically there's argon is an inert gas. So it doesn't do anything anyway. It's not contributing to global warming in any way, or climate change as they have rebranded it. But here we go. So that's the first thing. CO2, there's very little of it in the atmosphere. Now, how does that equate to parts per million? Okay, this is the scientific way that they describe gases, or people who study the climate and the atmospheres, how they study these things. Oh, by the way, I'm going to stick on the screen all of these references that I have from the CO2 Coalition website, which is a website headed by some very highbrow scientists who are trying to educate people on CO2. So you're more than welcome to go check that out. I'll leave the link below, but also do your own research as well. Don't just rely on me. Go check it out. I could be wrong. Anyway, so let's go this way. People say to me that the roads, you must have really smooth roads in Brunei. Look at this. Look at this. No, I do not have smooth roads in Brunei, and I still ride around on 23mm tires. Because titanium bike, that's why. Anyway, here's a big one. Whoop, whoop. Big lump, and another one. So where was I? Yes, okay, so parts per million. Basically at the moment in the atmosphere it's about 400 and something parts per million is CO2. People who believe that the world is ending because of CO2 are worried by this because a few decades ago, and I'm talking decades, probably about around the end of the Second World War, CO2 started going up. And people are worried by this because we used to be down around 300 and something parts per million in the atmosphere. And then after the Second World War, it started going up. So man-made production of CO2 started to go up. So we're now around 400 parts per million. And people are worried because CO2 is supposed to be a global warming gas, right? Greenhouse gas. It's supposed to heat the planet. So the sun shines down on the Earth, which is where we get all our heat from, basically. All heat on the planet is from the sun, shines down through our atmosphere and hits the Earth warms up, and then the Earth obviously releases that energy over time, and those waves of energy go up into the atmosphere, and some of them bounce back because they're trapped here by the atmosphere. And so the planet doesn't freeze, it stays warm because of our atmosphere, and that allows life to breathe and breed on the planet. You know, that allows for life on the planet, okay? So people are worried because it's getting warmer, or they predict that it will get warmer because the more CO2 in the atmosphere they think equals more warmth. People are panicking because, you know, in the last sort of 100 or 300 years, I don't remember if it's 100 or 300 years, so let's be generous and say 100. The temperature has risen by about half a degree, right? One half Celsius. If you're Americans out there, for a quick, you know, summing up of the metric system, 0 in Celsius is freezing, so the point at which water freezes. 100 is the point at which water boils. Let's get down here and get to the traffic lights, and then we've got to go through the traffic lights, or, well, actually we're taking a right. We might need the middle lane. Oh, it's green. Let's go. Can we make it? That's the question. I've got to scoot over too far to the right. And we're good. Lovely. Now the thing is, half a degree is not that serious. It's not going to kill us, and in fact, what people fail to realize is the benefits of CO2, and also the benefits of a warmer planet. That's something they don't discuss. To them, warming is all bad. They cite things like increased numbers of serious weather events, you know, cataclysmic weather events are going up because of CO2. This is actually not true. If you look at the graph for extreme weather events, or the information that we have on extreme weather events, going uphill now, so I've got to work a little bit, it's really not as bad as it looks. In fact, we're seeing less droughts, and every year we produce more and more food. There's more food than there are people. There's a great deal more food than there is people, actually. We could support a much bigger population, and that's a fact. And one of the reasons why we have more food is CO2. So CO2 is plant food. We all went to school, I'm sure, and we all studied photosynthesis. Very basic science. Hello. Very, very basic science. We all studied it, maybe if you don't remember, but pretty much everyone did. And it's this simple. Plants take on CO2, 1 carbon, 2 oxygen. They use the CO2 in photosynthesis, which is where the plant turns sunlight into food, which is sugars, and it also uses the carbon atoms for constructing its body, you know, its structure. Because we are carbon-based life forms, We need carbon in order to build cells and build structures, right? So the plant uses the CO2, and as it respirates, as it breathes pretty much, it expels the oxygen. So that's good for us because it means more oxygen, and it's good for the plants because greater CO2 equals more growth, and we can see that very clearly from scientific studies that have been done. The more CO2 you have, the more plants you have, and as a result, the more oxygen you will get. So we're better off if the plants are better off. Now here's what's really interesting. Remember I said that we're at about 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. Well, did you know all plant life on the planet would die, cease to exist, if we reached 200 parts per million, okay, or just lower than 200 parts per million. So we're only 200 parts per million CO2 away from the end of everything. We would all die because all the plants would die, the animals that feed on the plants would die, and we would die. And here's another interesting fact. Back just before the Second World War, I believe, I can check this, I'll stick it in the screen, we were around 300 parts per million, so we were very low. One might say we were in a CO2 deficit. You know, we didn't have enough. And thanks to human beings burning fossil fuel, which as we all know is made of dead plants, and dead creatures that were made of carbon, that were basically a carbon store for billions of years or millions of years, however long it takes to make oil or coal. By burning that oil and coal, we put back the CO2 that was missing from our atmosphere for all the millions of years that we had plants dying and being buried underground and, you know, being turned into coal. So we're only putting back the CO2 that was originally there. We're not adding CO2 that was never on the planet. We're putting back CO2 that was already on our planet way before human beings walked the earth. Now here's the crazy thing. Remember I mentioned that climate activists are worried about half a Celsius or 1 Celsius or even 2 Celsius increase. They're really worried about it. This point in our history, the human race, this point in our history, a quaternary period, I believe in geological terms. I'm just having a little drink. I believe it's called the quaternary period. We are at the lowest, or one of the lowest temperatures in history. Okay, so throughout most of history of the planet, and I'm talking millions of years here, we were a lot warmer than we are now. Okay? And life did not cease to exist because we got a little bit warmer, or we were a little bit warmer. If you take the world's average temperature, it's about 15 degrees Celsius, okay? That's the world's average temperature, 15 degrees C. The climate people, the climate, CO2 warriors are worried if we go up a couple of degrees from that point, so say we reach like 18 degrees Celsius, seems pretty serious. But during, for example, the Cambrian period, which was several million years ago, when life exploded on this planet, when we had a massive increase in life on the planet, we had all these new plants and animals and fishes and stuff that previously we never had. Life was just absolutely booming on the planet. The temperature was like 25 degrees Celsius, average. So it was way, way warmer than it is today. And we had the most abundant life. And if you look at where I am in Brunei, just as a simple example to help you understand this, you cannot stop plants from growing in this country. Like, I am at a constant battle with nature in this country. Nature is constantly trying to reclaim my house. Weeds, you know, plants, insects, mammals, they all come to my house and try to destroy it. You know, and part of that is the fact that life is so abundant here. It's, you know, the rainforest, for goodness sake. The rainforest is very hot and very wet, or very humid, should I say. So life loves it, absolutely loves it. And these are the kind of conditions that more of the planet was in during these other periods of history. If we go to the Jurassic period, again, we see the same thing. Lots of heat. It's very hot, and we had enormous dinosaurs. And one of the reasons why we had such enormous animals, both insects and dinosaurs, you know, and lizards and other things, and mammals, why everything was so big was because of the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. And the reason there was so much oxygen in the atmosphere during those periods was because there was a lot of plant life in those periods. And do you want to guess why there was a lot of plant life in those periods? Yes, there was much more CO2. How much more CO2? Oh, this is a great one. Okay, next quiz question. Okay, you already had the one about how much CO2 is there in the atmosphere. This one is, during the Cambrian period, when they had the explosion of life, how much CO2 do you think there was in atmosphere? We know this because we can drill down in the ice cores. All right, we drill down into the polar ice and we analyze the bubbles inside the ice, and we can tell how much of different elements was in the atmosphere. Okay, so we know this for sure. How much CO2 was in the atmosphere when life was most thriving and abundant on this planet? Don't forget, right now we're at 400 ppm, parts per million. 400. Do you think it was 500? Do you think it was 1,000? What do you think it was? Comments below. Well, it was 5,000 ppm. 5,000, that's 5 followed by 3 zeros. Life was doing super well on this planet with an atmosphere that contained 5,000 ppm of CO2, and today we're at 400. And we're only 200 away from the end of the planet, or end of life on the planet. So do you see now why I'm somewhat suspicious of people that want to tell me that CO2 is bad? Not only does it increase life on the planet, not only is it plant food, not only does it make me breathe in and out, not only does it make a tiny proportion of my atmosphere, but it's the lowest in history right now. Pretty much, apart from like pre-World War II. It's only around 200. They say that as CO2 increases, so does the world's temperature, so that, you know, we'll get hotter and hotter and hotter until we all boil to death because of increased CO2. That is not the case, and I'll tell you why, and this is quite important. Probably one of the most important points I'll make today. Increase in CO2 does increase the temperature. However, if you have, say, 100 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere, you will get a warming effect. If you double the amount of CO2, you will get a significant increase in that warming effect, okay? However, it's diminishing returns. It's a physical law of diminishing returns, okay? So adding more CO2, once you reach a certain saturation point, does not increase the warming effect, okay? So this was explained to me by a physicist whose lecture I watched. He does climate science, but he says I'm not a climate scientist. Don't insult me. You know, climate scientists are like, what do you call them? like political advocates. They're not real scientists. He said, I'm a physicist. He said it's very similar to this example. He said, imagine if you have a house. All right, you've got a house. Oh, money. Oh, beaten up quite bad. But I'm rich. I found like 5 cents. Lucky me. I'll probably have good luck all day now. Yeah, he said it's a bit like painting a house. He said you can paint a house red, right? So you get some really nice, good quality paint. You paint the house with one coat of paint, and it looks pretty red, okay? But it's only one coat. And after that point, you know, you see that there's some gaps or it's not quite thick enough, yeah? You can still see some of the original house color coming through. So you paint it again, you give it a second coat, as if you were adding more CO2 to the atmosphere, right? 100 ppm, to 200 ppm, say for example. So you add another coat of paint, and now the house looks really red. But here's the thing, at that point you've reached saturation. You can keep painting the house red with the same paint all you like. You can keep painting it all year round, but it won't get any redder because you've already saturated it. It's already red. And he said it's the same with gases in the atmosphere for their warming effect. And this is a scientific fact. This is physics. Once you reach a certain amount of CO2, you will see a diminishing return. The more CO2 you add, the less warming effect you will get. So everything that the climate scientists, inverted commas, are telling us is untrue. The world will not end if we increase CO2 because it was already much higher in the past. The best times in human civilization, we're talking like, you know, the Bronze Age and the Renaissance and all these times, you know, they all occurred during historic warm periods. The Iron Age, when we saw the Iron Age, the Bronze Age collapse, for example, it was during a cold period. When we saw the worst times in European history, the Dark Ages. Why did they call it the Dark Ages? Because it was bloody cold and dark. Right? The worst times in history, the times frequented by the most diseases as well, like big plagues, happened during cold periods. Same thing with the Romans, you know, during their cold periods, they would get more plague. So cold equals death. I'll give you another fact. This is a great fact. More people die as a result of cold weather than hot weather. Okay, it's about 3 to 1, I believe. Yeah, is that... That looks like an ammo clip or something. What do you call it? A magazine. Weird. More people die as a result of extreme cold than extreme heat. If you look at the UK, my country, the time of year when we lose most of the elderly is not during the summer, it's during the winter. I think it's about a 3 to 1 ratio. It might even be more than that. It might be a 10 to 1 ratio. I'll have to double check that, stick it on the screen. But basically, way more people die getting cold than getting hot. Lovely weather all year round, but if you get too hot, you just go under a tree. You know, you just get in the shade. Because the temperature in the shade is more than manageable, and you drink water. That's about it. But in the cold, if you're cold and you can't afford your heating bill, you die. There's not really much you can do. You can keep putting layers on, but people just can't get warm. Once they're cold, they can't get warm. It's a lot easier to cool down than it is to warm up. And you burn so many more calories trying to warm yourself. So yeah, that's why so many old people, and young people as well, but mostly old people, die in the UK from cold weather. NASA scientists, this is true, go look it up. have looked at the planet with their telescopes and things, and their big infrared scanners and whatnot, and they have said the world is getting greener. You know, the world is getting greener. As more of the planet becomes greener, we'll have more life and more oxygen to breathe, and plants and animals will get bigger. Plants will have more CO2 to breathe, and humans will have more oxygen. And we know that humans perform better in an oxygen-rich atmosphere, do we not? Because that is why sports people, you know, sportsmen, athletes, train in high altitude to reduce the amount of oxygen they breathe in. So when they come back down to normal sea level, everything feels oxygen rich and they perform much better. So what I'm saying is that if oxygen levels go up as a result of increased CO2, as a result of increased plant life, we will be better off as human beings. We'll be able to do more, go further, go faster. Let's talk a little bit about ice, because people are worried that when the ice caps melt as a result of increased warming, that we're all going to drown. Well, hate to disappoint you again, but that's probably not the case. Now, is it true ice is melting? Sometimes. It tends to be fairly seasonal. Sometimes it increases, sometimes it decreases. But here's the thing about ice. If ice is in water, right, if the ice is suspended in water, as we all know, the majority of an iceberg is under the water. So when the ice melts, it's not going to change the level significantly, because as was it Archimedes discovered that a physical body displaces an equal amount of water to its mass, you know, basically something along those lines. I might have cocked that up a bit, but you understand what I'm saying. It's, you know, this Archimedes rule. He jumped in a bathtub that was full to the brim, and the water overflowed out the edge, and he weighed the water, and it was equal to his mass. All right? So that's the same thing with ice in the sea. If you've got ice in the sea and it melts, it will displace the same amount of water. The water level will not increase as a result of that. Here's the other thing. If the ice is on the land, this is something really interesting. Now, obviously, you would expect that if the ice is on the land and it melts, well, it's going to increase sea levels. But here's the other interesting thing. That ice is pushing down on the land, right? That weight of ice is pressing down on the land with immense force. If that ice were to melt, the ice would go into the oceans would start to rise, and then the land would rise as well, because it would release the pressure like a big spring, right? You put weight on a spring, the spring goes down. Let me just check down here if they've finished this road, because I know they're building a new road, and if they finish the road, that's going to be really good, because this is a place I used to ride. Oh yeah, they've finished the road. That's fantastic. Oh, lovely. Can start coming this way now. That's great news. Sorry, it's just been waiting for them to finish this road for a long time. I used to do it on my gravel bike, and then they dug it all up, and it was even impossible to get through on a gravel bike. There was like bits of twisted metal and stuff everywhere. But they built a road now, so that's great. Let's go over to the residential area on the other side, so I'll be able to cut through there now. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the land, big spring, put weight on spring, spring goes down, release weight, spring comes up. So as the ice melts, the land will rise. As the land rises, it will displace less water. We're not talking 1 minute, you know, the water's at sea level, and the next minute it's 5 meters high. That's not going to happen. Okay, it's going to happen very gradually, millimeters at a time over many hundreds of years, and we will cope with that. The Dutch already know how to manage water quite well. We build islands in the ocean all the time. We simply will move to other places. We won't, because it won't happen during our lifetime, but maybe our children's generations may have to move inland a bit, but it doesn't matter because technology will improve and they'll be fine. This is a lovely place, by the way. There's an archery range here and some kind of paintball range, and you can also have your wedding here. I believe it's government owned, but I'm not sure. I don't think it's private. It's a beautiful place though, lovely buildings. So there you go. And where am I at? I keep losing my place. Yeah, it's just not we're not going to drown. And here's the thing, what really drives me nuts is the people who are complaining about this the most are the politicians. It's always the politicians going on and on about climate this, climate that, CO2 this, CO2 that. And all it is an excuse to tax us more, because that's all they ever do. They talk big, and their main thing that they do is they waste money on a lot of green energy, which really doesn't help. I mean, windmills are an absolute disaster for the environment and for bird life. Solar is only good when the sun's out, so it's only good in countries like Brunei, and then at night, great, you've got no power. You've got to stick it all in batteries, which is not particularly efficient. EV cars cost more CO2 to produce than petrol cars, and you have to drive them significantly further in order to get that CO2 back. And then the batteries are absolutely abysmal for the environment. So basically the government doesn't do anything particularly practical with regards to, you know, what they claim. All they do is charge you more tax. They say, oh, you want to fly to see your family in some other country? Oh, more tax for you. You want to fill your car up with petrol? Oh, more tax for you. How is that helping? It's not helping. The UK, Australia, you know, most European countries, for example, that keep taxing their citizens to high heaven, they produce the least amount of CO2. So it's a complete waste of time. China produces more CO2, well, let me put it this way. America produces more CO2 than the entirety of Europe put together, and also Australia, I believe. And China produces more CO2 than America, and they're not going to shut down their economy and charge their citizens more tax, are they? So it's a complete waste of time. But don't worry, because CO2 is good. That's the main thing. That's the main takeaway today. CO2 is good. Isn't this a beautiful place? Look at all these trees. Look at all these trees breathing in CO2, breathing out oxygen. Isn't it beautiful? Wouldn't you like this where you live? Lots of nice trees, all lush and green, beautiful warm weather. You know, bring on the CO2, that's all I can say. You know, they predicted, I remember I posted on my community page something that Greta Thunberg said about, oh, the world's going to end in like 5 years or something. 5 years came, we're fine, nothing's changed. Nothing dramatically has changed. The world's not ended, it's not going to end as a result of that. It's way more likely to end because of all these wars going on right now with nuclear powers getting involved. That's likely to end the world, not bloody CO2. So there, if you want to be scared about something, if you want to be get some activism about something, get some bloody activism about all these crazy governments and countries wanting to blow us all to hell with great big nuclear weapons. That's what you should be worried about, because that is a real possibility. That could happen literally any second. Someone could press a big red button and we all go to hell. So if you're going to worry about something, worry about that. Do not worry about plant food, which is all CO2 actually is. All right, thanks for watching, folks. As always, when you're out riding, stay safe, and I shall see you in the next video. Ta-ta.